My parents mocked my imaginary fiancé at a family party, until he showed up in a helicopter. There I was, standing at my cousin's engagement party while my parents laughed at the idea of my so-called imaginary fiancé. I quietly raised a toast, pretending not to care, just waiting for the moment he'd walk in and say, "Sorry I'm late, had to find a spot to park the helicopter," completely unaware we'd just flown in from Dubai. I'm 35, a woman from a traditional Indian American family based in Scottsdale, Arizona. My childhood followed the classic blueprint. Go to a top-tier college, preferably Stanford or Berkeley, become something respectable, doctor, engineer, lawyer, get married young, have a couple of kids, and settle down no more than 25 miles from your parents so they can swing by with samosas and unsolicited opinions. But I veered off script at 22 when I left pre-med and chose design. Strike one. Strike two. Walking away from grad school after landing a job with a global marketing agency in Berlin. Now my parents, Ravi and Meena, did not take that well. In their minds, freelancer basically meant unemployed, and remote consultant sounded like sits in pajamas clicking around online. Every conversation with them felt like a performance where I had to justify my entire existence. But the biggest offense? Telling them I was engaged, and that they couldn't meet the guy just yet. My dating history had always been a sore spot. They never approved of me dating outside the community. I never introduced them to anyone unless it was serious. So when I met Eli, who at the time was a pilot and aerospace consultant splitting time between Sweden and Qatar, I waited over a year before I even mentioned him to my family. And when I finally did, my mom's first reaction wasn't "congrats." It was, "Why haven't we seen him? Are you sure he exists?" She genuinely thought I'd made him up. Fast forward to last December. My cousin Nina, who's 30, was getting engaged. Her fiancé Adam was basically the poster child for perfect Indian husbands. Ivy League educated, a cardiothoracic surgeon. He ticked every box. The celebration? A massive, no-expense-spared blowout in a fancy banquet hall in Austin, Texas. 3 days of glam, buffets, choreographed dances, henna corners, even a brunch sitar player. I wasn't surprised to get an invite, but I did raise an eyebrow at the little jab in my mom's note. "Hope your fiancé can make it this time, smiley face." Eli and I had already planned to spend a few weeks in the US for the holidays. He had meetings in San Diego, and we were also visiting friends in Santa Monica, so it worked out. We arrived in California from Dubai a few days before the party. Eli had business in San Diego, and I had a quick client meeting nearby. The plan was to head to Austin the morning of the event. He had a last-minute meeting in Southern California, but promised he'd be there by dinner. We flew commercial into Austin that morning, then caught a short helicopter ride from a nearby executive airport. His friend runs a charter service and made it happen. Was it a little over the top? Sure. But honestly, it saved us hours, and turned out to be the perfect entrance. And immediately the comments started. The not-so-subtle whispers. The tight-lipped smiles. The usual interrogations from nosy relatives. "Where's your fiancé now?" "Dylan. Doha, was it?" Followed by, "Have you looked into egg freezing? We just worry about you, Lena. You're so independent." I held back. Smiled. Took photos with Nina. Tried to stay focused on being a good cousin. Then I heard my mom. She was near the bar, laughing with her sister, Nina's mom, and a few other aunties. "I've stopped asking," she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "She says he works in aviation, but what even is that? A flight attendant? She never shows us any pictures." I told Ravi maybe he's not even real. Cue the laughter. Not light chuckles either. We're talking open-mouthed, full-volume belly laughs at my expense. I stood there, gripping my glass of sparkling water, trying to keep my hand steady. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I let the moment wash over me like a wave of cold water. There was no point saying anything to them. But I had a feeling something was about to shift. After dinner, someone handed me the mic for a toast. I think the planner assumed I'd say something everyone else had. Aunts, uncles, even my younger brother Jason, who I hadn't spoken to in months, had taken the mic to talk about love and soulmates. I was wearing a deep wine-colored silk sari, my hair pinned up, simple gold jewelry. I stepped up and looked out at a room full of faces who had never taken me seriously. I didn't have a speech prepared. "I'll keep this short," I said. It's a beautiful thing to witness two people being supported, uplifted, and trusted. That kind of belief isn't something everyone gets. If you have it, hold on to it. Polite applause. Tepid. And then it happened. First, a faint buzzing sound, barely audible at first. It grew louder and unmistakable. The rhythmic churn of helicopter blades. Heads turned. Nina leaned toward the window, confused. The event planner darted toward the entrance, and then Eli walked in. He wore a tailored navy suit, no tie, his watch catching the chandelier light, hair slightly tousled from the wind. He looked like he belonged in a movie and made the whole room suddenly feel underdressed. "Sorry I'm late," he said, flashing a smile. "Had to park the helicopter." He landed in a helicopter and changed the whole room. Someone actually let out a gasp. Then Eli made his way straight to me, leaned in, and kissed me gently on the forehead. "Did I miss your speech?" he asked, his voice low. "No," I replied, smiling. "You got here just in time." The whole atmosphere shifted. I didn't even need to look around to feel it. The energy flipped. That cloud of subtle judgment, the tight smiles, and passive-aggressive curiosity, it all evaporated. Now people were paying attention. Curious. Awake. Their eyes followed Eli as he calmly introduced himself to the people nearby, starting with my aunt, Nina's mom, whose face twitched ever so slightly as she scrambled to figure out the appropriate expression. And then, of course, there was my mom. She stood just a few feet away, nervously playing with the edge of her dupatta, lips parted like she couldn't decide whether to attempt a smile or cling to the smug smirk she'd worn earlier. But Eli didn't falter. "Mina auntie, it's really great to meet you at last," he said warmly, extending his hand with easy confidence. She paused just a second too long before taking it. "Oh," she said, clearing her throat. "Yes, of course. Hello." That tone? I knew it too well. It was the one she reserved for neighbors she barely tolerated, the ones whose kids were always yelling or whose lawn ornaments multiplied like rabbits. Then Eli turned to my dad, who lingered farther back, arms crossed in that familiar, "show me what you've got" posture. "Ravi, uncle," Eli nodded respectfully. "I've heard so much about you." My dad returned the handshake, firm, practiced, like he was greeting a potential investor. But the clenched jaw? That was the giveaway. He was sizing Eli up. Measuring. Calculating. "I understand you're in aviation?" he asked. Eli nodded. "That's right. Mostly consulting these days, projects across Europe, the Gulf, and parts of Asia." Then he added, with a wry smile, "Still fly now and then. Helps keep me grounded, no pun intended." A few folks standing nearby chuckled. Not because it was hilarious, but because everyone was suddenly reevaluating everything they'd assumed. Suddenly, I wasn't the daughter who made up a boyfriend to dodge questions at family events. I was the mysterious one with a fiancé who quite literally dropped in like a plot twist. Yes, the helicopter made an entrance, but this wasn't about showmanship. It was about presence. Showing up when it counted. And Eli did that in a way no one could ignore. As uncles and curious cousins gravitated toward him, drawn into conversations about international aviation projects, I stepped to the side, just taking it in. It felt surreal. For years I had walked into rooms like that, bracing myself for passive digs and tight smiles that quietly screamed I was failing at some invisible checklist of how to live a proper life. But tonight? I was the thunderclap. Then Jason, my younger brother, approached during dessert, still basking in the glow of his earlier soulmate monologue. "So," he said, nodding toward Eli, "that's your guy?" I looked at him, more tired than annoyed, but still sharp enough not to let the moment pass. "Yep," I said, cool and steady. "That's Eli." He gave a short laugh, glancing toward the crowd now orbiting my fiancé. "Honestly, didn't think he was real." "Yeah," I said, shrugging. "Most people didn't." He hesitated, maybe about to say sorry, maybe about to pivot. I didn't give him the chance. I turned and walked toward Nina instead. To her credit, she wasn't the least bit rattled by the ripple effect Eli had just caused. I didn't hear Nina laugh. She wasn't near them, thankfully, or maybe she just chose to stay out of it, as she often did. Quiet defiance was her style. Nina's always been like that, graceful, grounded, quietly rebellious in her own way. Always backing me without stirring the pot. As I got close, she reached out and gently squeezed my hand. "Best moment of the night," she whispered with a grin. "I swear I wasn't trying to steal the spotlight," I said truthfully. "You didn't," she replied without hesitation. "You just took your place back. And damn, it was long overdue." Later that night, as things were winding down, my mom pulled me aside near the staircase leading to the valet. She looked off balance. Unsure, but curious. Why didn't you tell us he was coming? She asked. I gave a small shrug. Would it have made a difference? She paused. I didn't realize. Didn't realize what? I asked, arms folded. She looked down at her hands, then back at me. I didn't realize how serious he was. And there it was, all the weight of everything left unsaid between us. All the times I tried to share pieces of my life, only to be met with skepticism, silence, or subtle disapproval. The years I'd been made to feel like I was failing at adulthood because I wasn't checking off their boxes. But now? She was trying. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't smooth. But it was something. I'm glad you came, she said after a long pause. Me too, I said. And I meant it. Not for them. For me. Up on the rooftop, everything shifted. Later that evening, I slipped away to the rooftop terrace of the Austin Hotel where the after-party had quietly spilled over. The air was warm and still, the city lights twinkling just beyond the trees. In the distance, the dark outline of hills framed the skyline, and a soft breeze drifted through the open space. No music. No flash photography. Just quiet finally. Eli found me up there, sliding his arms around my waist from behind and resting his chin gently on my shoulder. How'd it go? He murmured. I smiled as I watched the Texas sky stretch over the quiet city. Honestly? Way better than I thought it would, but not nearly as easy as it should have been. He didn't answer right away. Then finally he said, they'll come around. I'm not waiting for that, I told him. I know, he said, pulling me in a little closer. We just stood there for a while, listening to the distant hum of traffic, the faint echoes of laughter floating up from below. I didn't know what would come next with my family. I didn't know if this moment would lead to something lasting or fade as quickly as the night around us. But I did know this: for once they saw me. More importantly, I saw myself. Eli and I stayed on that rooftop until the party was nearly over. The stars were faint but visible, scattered above the Texas horizon. Below us, the lights of the banquet hall glowed softly, and we could make out the end-of-night scenes unfolding: relatives packing leftovers in foil, uncles swirling the last drops of whiskey in their glasses, pretending to still be deep in conversation. It felt like we were outside the story, like actors who had stepped out of the play, watching it wrap without needing to rejoin the script. Eventually, we made our way back inside to say goodnight to Nina and Adam. They were still on the dance floor, swaying slightly, caught in their own bubble of contentment. I gave Nina a tight hug. You were amazing, I told her. So were you, she replied, grinning. You have no idea how satisfying that was for me. We both laughed. Adam offered Eli a casual fist bump, which Eli met with that calm, composed energy he always carried. As we headed toward the valet line, I could feel my parents' eyes on us from across the room. They didn't say much. My dad gave Eli a small nod, measured, distant. My mom offered a thin-lipped smile that almost passed for warmth. Almost. And that was enough. I wasn't holding out for a dramatic transformation. But something had shifted. Not loudly. No fireworks. More like a tectonic movement, quiet, but irreversible. Back at the rental apartment we were staying in, I peeled off my sari, wiped the smudged kajal from my eyes, and collapsed onto the bed with an exaggerated groan. That rough, huh? Eli asked, already halfway out of his suit, tie slung over a chair. Not rough, I said, staring at the ceiling. Just heavy. You ever walk into a room where everyone acts like you don't exist, and then suddenly they treat you like a TED speaker? He laughed. Yeah, he said. That's most rooms, actually. I laughed too. That's part of why we work, he just gets it. No long explanations required. Do you regret coming? He asked after a beat. What? Tonight. I pushed myself up on my elbows. Not even a little, I said. Because the truth was, even with the awkward moments, the subtle digs, and years of feeling like my life had to be defended in a courtroom, this shift meant something. Not because I needed validation for my choices or approval for my relationship, but because I finally got to face what had been weighing on me for so long. Eli lay beside me, one arm behind his head. You didn't need me to prove anything, he said softly. You already had. Maybe, I said. But having you there? It helped. The days that followed were strangely quiet. No fallout. No dramatic sit-downs. No surprise dinner invites. But little things started happening. My dad forwarded me a Forbes article about real estate trends. Reminds me of that project you mentioned, he wrote. Interesting read. My mom, who'd never once acknowledged Eli in front of others, shared a photo in our family group chat. It was from the engagement party. Eli and I were smiling near the stage. Her caption? Look who finally made it into the family album. And Nina's mom, the loudest one laughing at that imaginary fiancé joke, sent me a Facebook friend request. She even liked 3 of my old travel photos. From Jordan and Croatia. Even Jason sent a message. Jason, hey. Sorry if I've been a jerk. That was impressive. Me, not sure if that's an apology or the start of a TED Talk. Jason, let's go with both. I didn't answer right away. But I saw it for what it was, his version of an olive branch wrapped in brotherly sarcasm. One afternoon, back in Scottsdale, I stopped by my parents' house to pick up a few things my mom had saved for me. An old jewelry box. A shawl that had belonged to my grandmother. And a pressure cooker she insisted was too valuable to ship internationally. Eli stayed in the car, scrolling through his phone while I went inside. The house looked exactly the same. They finally saw it, but I'd already moved on. The house still carried that familiar scent, incense and coriander, woven into the walls of my childhood. The same warm smells I'd grown up with. Family photos lined the hallway, now updated with fresh snapshots, Nina and Adam, radiant and picture-perfect. But what stopped me in my tracks was a newer photo, one of Eli and me at the engagement party. We were smiling, standing side by side like we belonged there. Did you print this? I asked as my mom walked into the hallway. She glanced at the frame, then at me. Nina sent it, she said softly. I liked it. It's a good picture. And it was. We stood there in silence. She adjusted a nearby vase pointlessly, just to occupy her hands. I might have misread things, she said cautiously. He seems thoughtful. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly. But it was the closest thing I'd ever gotten. I never needed you to be impressed, I told her steady. I just needed you to stop thinking I was making it all up. For once, she didn't argue. You've always taken your own path, she said after a pause. That's just hard for us sometimes. Then she added, but maybe different isn't the same as wrong. It wasn't a revelation. But it was a crack in a wall I'd long thought immovable. I picked up the box she'd packed, an old jewelry box, a shawl from my grandmother, a pressure cooker she swore was too valuable to ship, and gave her a quick hug before either of us could say too much and ruin it. When I got back to the car, Eli looked up from his phone. You good? I nodded. Yeah. He didn't press. That's one of the reasons I love him. He understands that silence is sometimes the safest place. We flew back to Dubai a few days later. The emotional weight of everything didn't hit me until we landed, until the warm air wrapped around me and I heard that soft blend of Arabic and English again, grounding me. Dubai was bold and relentless, full of confidence and ambition. Nothing like the version of me that shrank in the presence of judgment back home. Eli and I didn't talk much about the party after that. We didn't need to. The trip had done what it needed to do. We returned to our rhythm, midnight dinners on the balcony, weekend sailing off the marina, work trips to Riyadh and Paris. Just us again. And still, something lingered. Not bitterness. I no longer craved their approval. But I did feel the weight of unfinished business. My parents had started to soften, to acknowledge my life, but they still didn't see it. Not really. Not the long hours, the sacrifices, the choices that built everything I now had. For years, they'd laughed, doubted, dismissed. Certain that their version of success was the only one that mattered. They never believed I could create something real, something lasting, something mine. And the truth? I didn't just want them to accept it. I wanted them to witness it. Loudly. Unavoidably. That's when the idea hit. A few months later, Eli and I were both invited to speak at a major business summit in Dubai. He was scheduled to speak on aviation logistics in emerging markets. I was being honored for my consultancy work after my design and branding agency crossed the $1 million mark and secured a partnership with the global luxury group. They asked me to give a keynote on building cross-cultural brands and scaling without outside investors. I said yes with one condition. I wanted to invite guests. They agreed. I mailed 2 priority invitations to my parents with a handwritten note. You once asked if I was serious about my life. Let me show you what serious looks like. 3 days passed. Then a text from my mom. We'll be there. When they landed at Dubai International, Eli picked them up. Not in a helicopter this time. That moment had already served its purpose. Instead, he drove our Tesla and brought them back to our apartment on the Palm. A clean, modern 3-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling glass, an open kitchen and soft Moroccan tiles running through every hallway. I watched my mom's eyes trace the pendant lights and ocean view. My dad tried to hide it, but I saw it, the subtle recalibration, the mental rewriting. This wasn't the barefoot, broke daughter they had imagined. This was someone who hosted investor dinners on rooftop terraces and signed NDAs with luxury conglomerates. The next evening, I stood on stage at the summit. I wore a tailored white pantsuit, hair pulled back, every inch of me sharpened by persistence and grit. I told my story, not the drama, not the family tension, but the part that mattered. Being overlooked. Being told no. Believing in yourself before anyone else does. I spoke about building my own table when no one offered a seat. And in the front row, my parents sat and listened. My mom's eyes shimmered. My dad clapped slightly too long. Afterward, business leaders and entrepreneurs came up to talk, some from Dubai, some from New York, even a few royals. And my father stood nearby like it was one of his old mixers, shaking hands, nodding along, proud in that quiet, calculated way of his. That night at dinner, my mom turned to Eli and said softly, "Thank you. For standing by her. For believing when we didn't." Eli smiled. Politely. He didn't say you're welcome. Because by then it wasn't about them anymore. The real victory wasn't in making them proud. It was in making it clear. They were never the ones holding the pen. The best kind of revenge was never loud. The real win was realizing they no longer had anything to do with my success. I didn't need their validation, not anymore. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel amazing to watch the doubt fade from their faces, replaced by something else entirely: respect. Maybe even awe. They finally saw it. That I hadn't just lucked into something. I had taken flight and soared. Later that week, just before they flew back to Arizona, my dad pulled me aside on the balcony of our apartment in Dubai. The city lights stretched behind us. Below, the shoreline glimmered under the night sky. "You've done well," he said quietly. "I didn't get it before. But you've really built something." I looked at him. This man who once called design just a hobby. The same man who, 3 years ago, offered to pay for a master's degree if I would just course correct. Because he thought I was falling behind, both professionally and personally. "I know," I said. He gave a slow nod, then added, "I'm proud of you." It had taken 35 years to hear those words. And honestly, I didn't need them anymore. But hearing them still felt good. Not because they changed anything, but because they confirmed what I already knew. That was the real revenge. It wasn't the helicopter entrance at Nina's engagement. It wasn't the keynote address in Dubai. Or the 7-figure company. Or the glass-walled apartment overlooking the ocean. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about becoming the woman they never saw coming. And then giving them a front row seat to the life they once thought was impossible.